Hi everyone, welcome to the post-screening panel conversation where you're going to meet some of the people featured in the Tight Knit series. Just to introduce myself, I'm Ashley Milne-Tyte. I'm the reporter and host for the 8 podcasts that are part of this series. And with me today, I have Dr. Paula Duren, who you just met in Today Was a Good Day. She's a psychologist, and she's also the director of Universal Dementia Caregivers, which offers support to families of people with dementia, particularly in underserved communities. And we also have KaTania Brown, who also just appeared in the film. She takes care of her mum, who lives in assisted living. And she's also an author. Most recently, she just published a book called Love Notes, a Caregiver's Journal. And the third person we have today is Brenda Roberts. And Brenda appears in 2 of the podcasts that are part of the Tight Knit series. Her husband, Mark, has early onset dementia, and Brenda and Mark live in a 4-generation home in Elwell, Michigan, with various family members. They all live and care together. And they also have an incredible service dog called Sophie, who also greatly helps Mark and Brenda as well. And Brenda also works for the Michigan Assisted Living Association. And we'd be really happy to take any questions as they come in. But first off, I thought I would start by pitching a question of my own. And Kat, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay, and just go straight in and talk about COVID-19. Because you don't live with your mother, how has it been? How has COVID affected your caregiving?
Tremendously. I visited my mom at least once or twice a week prior to, and my last day actually physically touching her before shutdown was March 5th. So up until that point, it was communication via phone. During the shutdown when we were basically ourselves quarantined, I was, calling and checking in, and she would call me periodically if, her mind kind of thought of me, but I really did not have the opportunity to see my mom through even the window until Mother's Day. And I'm going to be very, very candid, and I like to be transparent about things that I have actually been in like therapy and counseling prior to this because I know I was struggling with my mom's decline and how I was really gonna navigate through this. So just continuing that therapy once a week has been a lifesaver in some respects to help me have an outlet to talk about my feelings and my emotional state. I will also share that probably the weekend leading up to Mother's Day, I think it was the first time that I really got angry about the COVID situation. And this would be the first Mother's Day that I was not able to touch her, see her, spend time with her. And I had to really kind of talk about that a lot in therapy. So it was devising a plan, even weeks leading up to what that might have looked like. And that was, doing what I normally do with the exception of not being able to touch her. So I, went there with everything that I normally do, gifts in hand, and I was excited to see her face. She was excited to see my face. I recorded a video, which allowed me to keep going through this entire process. But, my concerns were, just making sure that she continued to get the care, even though I wasn't physically able to be there with her. I'm not saying that others can't do what I do, but I also know that this is an environment that none of us have been in. So, the caregivers were stretched pretty thin, and I had my concerns about housekeeping and whether or not she was gonna, I put her clothes out every week. So now no one's going to be doing that for her. And what is she going to look like? What are they going to put her in? And all of these things are going through my head. But I also had to take a step back and say that, okay, she's going to be fine. And first and foremost, that she's healthy and that she comes out of this on the other side. They only had one isolated incident at the very, very beginning where she lived. And they have since, continued to test. And she had an accident a few weeks ago, which I have stated might be a blessing, that she, and this might sound strange, she cracked her orbital bone, she fell. But having to take her to the hospital or, her follow-up appointment allowed me the opportunity to see her and to touch her a couple weeks ago. And I was actually with her yesterday for another follow-up. And I said it was a blessing in disguise, because even though she injured herself, I at least got the chance to hold her hand and to give her a hug and to give her a little smooch, even through the mask. So COVID has definitely changed the landscape of our relationship, but I also have relied a lot on my faith.
Brenda, how about you?
Yeah, COVID has really changed our lives, especially my husband. I mean, he was a very active person. We went to our grandkids' sporting events. He'd even go sit and watch them play practice, their games. We'd go to church every Sunday, and he sang in the choir. Stopped. Everything has stopped. And in addition to that, what's really heartbreaking to me is I have become aware that a few weeks ago that he was having absolutely no outside contact with the outside world except his family and one group that we meet with on Zoom once a week, a group of people living with dementia. But there was nobody in the outside world that initiated a contact with him. And so I've tried to orchestrate that a little bit myself to get some other people involved. And one of the things I'm encouraging is just, I think it'd be just amazing. We have one young woman who is now volunteering and calling him at least once a week and texting him occasionally. And she's so great. She'll talk to him for an hour and she'll let him talk about what he wants to talk about, what's interest to him. And so it's the social isolation. And then if you asked Mark, he would indicate that he's noticed a cognitive decline during this time. And initially, when, like Kat said, when we were staying home, initially I thought, oh, it's going to be this short time and he'll get back out and he'll be okay. He'll never return now, I see, to the Mark who was before. Okay. And so it's definitely quickened the pace of change.
Paula, does this reflect what you're hearing? I mean, what do you think?
Your audio.
I think you might be on mute. Nope.
Now you are.
Oh. All right. Yep. She's not on mute. Can you hear us? Yes. Oh, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. I'm not sure the audience can either. I don't know if the technical gods can step in to facilitate that. While we try and sort that out, let me just move on in the hope that we can get you back vocally, Paula. So another thing I was going to ask about was when you hear the word, both of you, when you started this, Kat, do you think of yourself as a caregiver, or do you think of yourself as a daughter helping her mother? How do you feel about that, the sort of the caregiver terminology?
Well, I will say in the beginning, I was a caregiver. I mean, our process started in 1991 when I was in my 20s, and now I am not in my 20s. I'm in my 50s, and Up until I actually had to relocate her into assisted living, I was caregiver. I was, doctor's appointments and everything that went with that process. And now, once I did move her to assisted living, I became her daughter, because a lot of the tasks that I was doing, I didn't have to do as much of anymore. They had a doctor that would come onto site, which alleviated me having to schedule so many appointments and wonder if she's getting her medications and her isolation. She was a part of the PACE program that was also instrumental in keeping her active. But now, I can kind of shift gears, and I've become more of her daughter that looks out for her and just makes sure now I'm her advocate. I'm not storing my mother in assisted living. So they know that I'm a presence there. And if I have questions or concerns, I'm going to address those. I'm going to bring them to their attention. But at the same time now, it has alleviated a lot of stress for me. And at first, I will say my mom was not happy about moving into assisted living at all. But I will say a couple of years after she was there, she finally said, "Thank you. I know that this has helped you a lot." And she actually apologized for some of the times that she was extremely difficult. And she's like, "But I think this was for the best." So yes.
That must have been very affirming.
Yes, I struggled. I struggled a lot with the decision to move her into assisted living or try and figure out a way to, have her move with me. And it wasn't feasible. And as a single person who is working, and it's an only person that's doing all this, I couldn't realistically make that happen. So I talked to her counselor at the time, and she said, "There's a reason why these communities or assisted living is in place if you can't do it." And that's another way to show that you love someone, is to, allow yourself to be able to care for them better.
Absolutely. And just, Brenda, before I toggle over to you, can I just, since Paula's back with us, Paula, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay!
Excellent.
Wonderful.
All right. So let me just go back. We'd finished off talking about COVID with Brenda and Kat. I was just curious what you're hearing and seeing on that front from the caregivers that you work with.
Well, what we're seeing is very similar to what was shared by both Brenda and Kat. There's a sense of isolation, yet safety appears to be the most important thing for a lot of the caregivers we talk to. And they said, if we could have anything, we'd love to have some companions. But how do you socially distance in a way that you can ensure safety at the same time? So it's figuring out how to balance for them, because they're even some of them are keeping their families away at the same time, because every household holds a different set of opportunities for infection. So companionship, safety, and they really need respite, but respite is inconsistent with bringing people, taking them into other places. Right. So saying the same things they're saying, yet they seem to be digging deeper. And I hear that from people constantly. I'm relying on my faith. I'm praying. I'm going to that place that you have to go when nothing else works. So even though it's tough, people remain hopeful. And that's the beauty of the group of folks we serve, is that there's so much faith and hope and looking forward to that day when it's going to be different.
And Paula, while I've got you, let me just ask you this, because I know you have personal experience with caring for your own parents. When you started doing more and more for them, did you think of yourself as a caregiver, or did you just think, "Oh, I'm their daughter, I'm just helping them out"? Did that word caregiver resonate with you?
Well, I started out like most people. I was just doing little things, and the little things started becoming more and more prevalent and stuff she had to do. So I was a daughter doing things for my parents, yet I took the label caregiver, but I also took the label care partner, because I have this notion that love is a two-way. So I saw the relationship as a way of us caring for each other. And there are all kinds of moments of stories that we could share with you on You Have to Share Love. So the title didn't mean a lot to me. It was the role that I served and that I accepted, because to me, that's the biggest issue, is accepting that I'm going to take on this role, because then there's a level of peace that comes in your spirit that I'm not fighting it anymore, because people fight the title. And I don't know, call me a caregiver, call me a care partner, I don't care which care, I'm going to care for this person that I love and do everything I can to ensure their health and safety.
Brenda, pitch in on this. I know you have feelings about this.
You've struck a chord that I'm passionate about, as you know, Ashley. Okay, so I'm just first in the podcast I share with Ashley, the first time someone referred to me in my husband's presence as his caregiver. I did not like it. I was, we talk about language today. I was offended because here my husband sat right next to me. I am not his caregiver. He does not need a babysitter. And so caregiver to me sort of means giver, passive receiver. And I wasn't just giving and he receiving. And I say that, but then the back of my mind says, well, initially I kind of did do more than I needed to. So I was a giver. But we've come into a point. We are care partners. That's what we've agreed on, because he is my partner. I'm his partner. We have been for 43 years. I care for him and he cares for me. And so the lesson that I learned is, for me, that was really major, I think, was I did and I do let Mark take care of me too. In the little, some people might think they're so little that they're insignificant.
Oh, no.
No, they're not, are they, Paula? I mean,
no.
He knows I drink iced tea all day long. So he'll constantly bring me a fresh, nice glass of tea. And it just means he was thinking of me. He loves me. And it's something he does for me. My husband, we talk about different love languages. His is acts of service. And so I have to give him opportunities to continue to provide acts of service. So he still takes care of me and I take care of him. So we're care partners. Although the relationship has changed, husband and wife.
Absolutely.
But we're still partners in this.
We've had a question come. Oh, sorry, Paula, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things, our training program is called Care Partners Passage Through Dementia. Yet I meet people where they are. If someone uses the language caregiver, I don't fight them on the language, because that's less important than the gifts that you're giving. So one of the things for me, I will use them interchangeably because I define them for what they mean to me. And just an example with my mother, as she progressed at night, she became fearful. And so I would sit at her bedside until she fell asleep. And so that was my gift giving to her. But every night she would say to me, do you have enough cover? And she would reach over and touch me. And that was her gift to me. So we were giving to each other. So I think it's an exchange of, I view caregiving as an exchange of gifts. I had certain gifts and talents. She had certain gifts and talents. I did, and I honored them, whatever they were. I honored the gifts that she gave to me.
So the question that came in is sort of about this daughter-parent relationship. Is it weird seeing your role shift from daughter to caregiver? Telling your mother that she can't do something for safety or health reasons can be very difficult.
Oh my God, yes. Are you kidding? Oh my God, yes. Especially now, okay, I'll just say that my mother now calls me her mom, because she now realizes that the role has definitely shifted even for her. So I think that was probably one of the biggest struggles, is how do I tell my mom that she can't drive? I mean, when she started getting lost and she was only a few miles away from home going to her Bible study, how do I say, you can't drive anymore? I'm going to take the keys. I don't think it's safe for you. That's something that a teenager is told after they've done something wrong. And she didn't do anything wrong. It's just that for her own safety, for her own well-being, it just was not safe for her to go to church in the middle of the day. And I'm at work, and I know that she's supposed to be home by 2 o'clock. And by 4 o'clock, I still haven't heard from her. And by 4:30, I'm getting into an up panic. And finally, she calls me about 4:45, and I'm like, where have you been? And she's like, I got turned around. Oh my God. Okay. We're going to have a conversation. So that was really the shift in our relationship, even more so to now say that it's not your fault, but I can't trust you to be a driver anymore. So it really is interesting that the world definitely changes, and how the roles that we have changed so much that I was her daughter. I'm always going to be her daughter, but she calls me her mom.
Paula, does that ring bells for you?
It absolutely does. And to me, that's one of the transition points in the relationship when we change the role change, because they're like major, I call them socio-emotional tasks as the journey progresses. And that's a clear marker that when that role changes. Yet I just stepped into it, because in the process of stepping into it, I tried to honor what she was still able to do. I never took anything away from her that she couldn't do. And even if I had to support and assist her, I never tried to take anything from her. So the things that I took on were things that she in her own life may not have realized it, but she had to give it up anyway. So, and I worked with her to say, let's do this together. Before I would just do it, let's figure out how we do it together. Then I end up doing it. Some say I'm probably a little bossy, and I probably just like the role anyway. But it's one of those things. I knew it was a transition. I knew it was a journey. And I knew that I had to allow her to do everything she could do as long as she could do it, and not take anything that she was able to do, and kept in my own mind. Because people would say, Paula, you lie to your mom. Well, the research calls it creative fibbing. You do what you need to do to make sure their world is safe and right for them. And that was my whole goal. I told people I was going to make the last days of my parents' lives their best days. So that's kind of the way I took that role on.
Brenda, just changing tack a little bit. I mean, what would you say? And I know you and Mark are both dementia advocates, so you talk a lot to other people, but especially now that we're in a more constricted situation with COVID, and people may be feeling, who are just getting into a caregiving situation, may feel particularly alone and sort of at sea. Like, what would you say to people starting out on a caregiving or care partner journey? Because it can seem really overwhelming when you first find that you're in this situation.
Yeah, you know what? I remember, and Kat, like you, I believe in transparency, number one. And number two, one of the things that we've done initially and throughout our journey is get counseling and talk through things and help us. And one thing I remember wishing that people would have let me do, like, I was worried about the future, and they would say, well, live in the present. I wish somebody would have let me worry about, because then I worried about, I'm not living in the present. So Dr. Paula said something about joining them where they are. I wish they would have joined me in worrying about the future. And because now then I started worrying, well, I'm worrying about the future. I should only be concerned with the present. And eventually those two came together. And I quit worrying about the present, and I quit worrying about the future. And what we did is, quite frankly, is we decided we weren't going to buy into the narrative tragedy that we so frequently hear about living with dementia. And we looked around, and so people who are newly diagnosed, look around. It's not always easy to find like-minded people. A little bit of work, but go with like-minded people who want to live well with dementia. Are there challenges? Absolutely. But all life has challenges, right? And so we came to a point after the diagnosis, we described it, and a lot of our friends like the black hole afterwards. You know, it's shocking, it's devastating. But then we came to a point and said, guess what? One life to live.
That's right.
We have dementia. We're going to make it the best life that we can. And so I wanted to build on something that Dr. Paula said too about not taking away all the time. I tend to think that when someone gets dementia or diagnosed as dementia, I often do this with my hand. I say, we start taking away. Oh, take the keys away, take this away, take that away. My personal philosophy is I try to add under here rather than take away. So if I can put a support under here, is he going to change? Yes. Is it going to be a decline? Yes. But if I can put as many supports in along the way to, have a healthy, happy life, experience well-being, then we try to put those props in place or compensatory strategies. And, one of my favorite, as you know, is talking about our dementia service dog and the element of joy that's brought into our life, and independence and socialization for my husband.
Kat, what would you say to somebody just starting out on this journey?
Oh boy. I think, and I think I want to kind of just step back if possible to between Paula and Brenda. Brenda, your role is interesting because you can say you're a partner because it's your spouse. Caregiver, I think, is different because if it's your parent or someone that's not blood related, it might be a little different to me. And that might be how I'm going to interchange it. But I thought about that as you both were talking. It's like what your role is to that person is to whether or not you're a care partner or a caregiver. They are interchangeable in some respects, for sure. But to answer your question, Ashley, there's really no right or wrong at all. I mean, none of this comes with a handbook at all. And even everything that you can be taught or classes that you take, and Dr. Paul and I talked about that when my mom didn't recognize me on Thanksgiving. Everything that I had been taught or all the workshops and everything, I didn't remember none of it, nothing about anything, because I'm in that moment where my mother doesn't recognize me. So all the training that you can prepare yourself for, it's really going to be human nature, and you never want them to forget you. It's going to be a gut punch. It just is. But I think that if you are always an advocate for that person, and you will fight for them no matter what, they will always be first in your life. I'm like Roger. He's like, how do I date when my mother is right here? And I have said, even after this, I'm thankful that I have somebody in my life who's not only known my mother for 30 plus years, but also now understands even more what my role is. We're a package. There's no way around that. So until, God forbid, she's no longer here, you are a package deal, and you can't separate one from the other. So as long as you're an advocate for that person as well, it's gonna unfold. It's gonna happen, but you got to let it happen. And there's no right or wrong. It's just love.
Paula, we have to wrap up in just a second, but I'd love it if you have any final thoughts along those lines of advice to people or words of wisdom for people starting out.
I would start by saying, understand that it's going to be a journey. And a journey does not have a clear destination or in terms of how you're going to get there. You have to be open to whatever happens. And yes, there are gut punches that are going to come along the way, but there are going to be some joys and excitements along the way. I say learn, and learn together if you can about the disease and what to expect, because at least you're intellectually smarter, and then some of the things you see won't shock you quite as bad. So learn in the process. One of the things, I love what you said, Kat, there is no right or wrong in terms of just being, but sometimes you just need to simply be present. You don't have to do anything, just simply be present. And I guess my last thing is look for the gifts. As I engage the caregivers and as I engage my parents, I was always looking for the beauty in the moment. Even though I would cry sometimes, even in the midst of my tears is when I was most creative. I designed my program based on the pain that came out of my love for my parents. There's a gift to be found if you can focus on it. Learn, simply be present, know that there's no right or wrong, and it truly is a journey.
That's a wonderful way to end. Thank you. Thanks to all three of you so much for being part of the panel. And for everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us. And this film, the film you just saw, Today Was a Good Day, will be joining all the other content on tightknit.org. That's where you can find both films and all 8 podcasts. And the podcasts are also available on Apple Podcasts, pretty much any podcast app. And they're also on Spotify as well. And the whole point we made these stories was so that people could share them. We know there are so many caregivers out there, and very often they feel alone, their stories go untold, and there are so many people doing what everyone here is doing, and we would love the stories to just reach as many people as possible. So please share them widely, and thank you again so much for joining us.